timeline of a massacre. Authorities release more details on the shooting at a Florida high school. We have the latest. Dreamers react. As immigration reform stalls on Capitol Hill, hundreds of thousands of immigrants hang in the balance. Protecting the unborn. We talk to an advocate trying to save baby girls from sex-selective abortion in China. And a window into their work. We visit the tiny shop responsible for adding color to the Vatican. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 16th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsbee, in for Lauren Ashburn. A grand jury charges 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities with an elaborate plot to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
The indictment alleges that the Russian conspirators want to promote discord in the United States and undermine public confidence in democracy. We must not allow them to succeed.
The defendants are accused of violating U.S. criminal laws to influence American elections and the political process. Charges include conspiracy, wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. But Rod Rosenstein says the efforts did not affect the outcome of the election.
It doesn't matter what side of the gun control argument you're on, like, people are dead.
Anguish is giving way to anger in Florida as families begin to bury their loved ones. Investigators say the FBI knew about the teenager charged with killing 17 people at a Parkland, Florida high school. The agency received a report last month about Nicholas Cruz, but agents failed to investigate the tip. Now friends and families are forced to say their final goodbye too soon.
Our kids are amazing. Our eagles will soar.
Thousands gathered last night to remember the victims. In addition to the 17 killed, more than a dozen others were hurt. Stories of heroism are emerging about teachers and coaches who died trying to save the students around them.
Mr. Beagle was my hero, and he still will forever be my hero. I will never forget the actions that he took for me.
Among the dead is athletic director Chris Hickson, a father of 2 and a practicing Catholic. The suspected shooter is now under a suicide watch. His lawyer called him a broken human being. The Senate has left hundreds of thousands of dreamer immigrants in limbo, rejecting rival plans that would have spared them from deportation and strengthened the nation's border security.
On this vote, the yeas are 54, the nays are 45, 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
President Trump originally gave lawmakers until March 5th to come up with a dreamer's solution, but 2 judges put that on hold, temporarily ruling against the president. The White House is placing the blame squarely on Democrats, saying they are not serious about helping dreamers or passing immigration reform. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. The White House hoped to see the bill from Republican Senator Chuck Grassley pass the Senate. It included the border security and enforcement measures the president wanted, along with a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million dreamers. In reaction to the bill being shot down, the president tweeting, "Cannot believe how badly DACA recipients have been treated by the Democrats, totally abandoned. Republicans are still working hard." It's worth noting 14 Republicans voted against the Grassley bill. It received the least support among all of yesterday's immigration proposals. The White House called the bill a compromise. Now it's hoping immigration legislation from House Republicans Bob Goodlatte and Michael McCall will be advanced. The president is also focusing on the aftermath of the Parkland school shooting. This morning tweeting, "I will be leaving for Florida today to meet with some of the bravest people on earth, but people whose lives have been totally shattered. I'm also working with Congress on many fronts." The president will meet with state governors and attorneys general later this month. He says finding ways to make schools and children safe will be a top priority. Wyatt.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Young immigrants are speaking to Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvey after yesterday's votes. The Dreamers say they are heartbroken.
Reina Montoya can't put up a wall to hide her pain. When she was 13, her family brought her to the United States illegally from Mexico. She's had to live in the shadows. Now she's busy in the background of Capitol Hill, urging senators to keep the protections from deportation for dreamers like her.
They looked at me in the eyes and they said they wanted me to stay here, and others showing otherwise. So definitely feeling really hurt. I'm disappointed.
The motion is not agreed to.
The Senate shooting down one immigration plan.
The motion is not agreed to.
After another.
The motion is not agreed to.
4 in all failing.
The motion is not agreed to.
Thank you.
Now these dreamers mourn.
Can't move forward because we don't know which way to go.
Mr. President, our message is simple.
Democrat Chris Coons, whose failed proposal would have allowed the Dreamers permanent residency, says the Senate needed more time.
Why anyone would think that we could resolve fully the complex and difficult questions of immigration without committee hearings and with really 4 votes on one day shows a lack of appreciation of how difficult, divisive, and complex this issue is.
But Republican Senator John Kennedy is blunt with his blame.
If I were a dreamer right now, I would be furious with Senator Schumer. How dare he play politics with my life like this?
But why are you blaming Senator Schumer for this?
Because he's responsible. He did it. He stalled and restalled all week. We were ready Monday night. I was ready Monday night.
Reina is ready too, for Congress to give her protection.
They should know that if I get deported, if thousands of dreamers get deported, it's because of their lack of courage and their lack and inability to take action.
Congress is gone on its President's Day recess. The number 2 Senate Republican, John Cornyn, says lawmakers may temporarily protect dreamers in a must-pass spending bill. That bill is needed to keep the government open after March 23rd. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Former Massachusetts governor and presidential candidate Mitt Romney announces his next political move.
I have decided to run for United States Senate because I believe I can help bring Utah's values and Utah's lessons to Washington.
The Romney for Utah campaign released an online video this morning. He'll be vying for the senator seat now held by retiring Senator Orrin Hatch. Romney, a Mormon, was a strong critic of President Trump during the campaign. This week, Pakistan bids farewell to one of the country's most prominent human rights activists, Asma Jahangir. She died of a heart attack at age 66. Catholics and other Christians attended her funeral. Thousands gathered in the eastern city of Lahore this week to say goodbye to a woman respected by politicians, judges, and human rights advocates. The death of Asma Jahangir, a strong defender of religious minorities, is a reminder to many Pakistanis that there is a long way to go in advancing her cause. Farah Isfahani, a former member of Pakistan's parliament who now lives in the United States, tells me many obstacles remain.
Unfortunately, Pakistan is not going to get better vis-a-vis our religious minorities unless there is a massive overhaul, not just of the Constitution, but now of the society itself.
Isfahani says children are taught at a young age that non-Muslims are essentially second-class citizens.
This starts with the Constitution, then it goes into government textbooks where this is carried forth. Christians are seen as agents of the West. Hindus are seen as agents of India.
As a result, Pakistan continues to be a violent place for them. Christian groups, including Open Doors USA, cite Pakistan as one of the most dangerous countries in the world for followers of Jesus. Human rights abuses are a problem in other parts of Asia, including China, where pro-lifers face many challenges as well. Our next guest has launched a campaign there to save unborn baby girls. Sex-selective abortion is not a new phenomenon in the country. An old Chinese proverb says, "The more sons, the more blessings." But China's preference for boys comes with costs. For every 100 girls, there are 115 boys. And according to the U.S. State Department, in 2015, the communist country carried out 23 million abortions. Reggie Littlejohn joins us now. She's the president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, an advocacy group that is fighting forced abortion and sexual slavery in China. Reggie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
As an advocate working on this issue for decades, can you describe the impact of sex-selective abortions on girls in China?
Yes. Basically, because of brutal son preference, girls are still selectively aborted, even under the two-child policy. And the ones that are especially in danger are second daughters, so that most couples will let a first daughter live, but then for that second child under the two-child policy, that's their last chance to have a boy, and many couples will opt to either abort or abandon their girl.
What is it about girls that they don't want a baby girl?
Traditionally, when a young couple marries, the young woman goes over to the young man's family and they will support his parents in their old age. So sons are like Social Security for Chinese couples. And so when they only have two girls, and under the two-child policy, the second girl, they feel like they have a choice of either aborting or abandoning that girl or facing poverty in their old age.
You mentioned the two-child policy. Obviously, for decades, China had a one-child policy. Now they've implemented where married couples can have two children. What has the impact that been like? I know it's been only since 2015, but do we know?
Well, yes, we do know a lot of the impact, and that is that the way the Chinese Communist Party announced the two-child policy is they said that they were abandoning the one-child policy. And I think they deliberately were trying to give the impression that they were abandoning all coercive population control, and that is not true. The new rule is every couple is allowed to have two children, which means you have to be a member of a couple, which means that single women are still forcibly aborted. And also allowed to have two children, that means third children are still subject to abortion. So we are still, coercive population control in China is not over.
Right. Right now, the Vatican is trying to reach a diplomatic breakthrough with China. You've spoken about this before as a human rights advocate there. Obviously, we know the Chinese, you said before, the Chinese don't necessarily have good intentions. So what would your advice be to the Vatican who's trying to negotiate with China?
I believe that we're in a situation where the Vatican is negotiating in good faith, and the Chinese Communist Party is not negotiating in good faith. They are officially atheistic. They are completely antagonistic to all religions, including the Christian religion, and especially the Catholic faith, because of the loyalty to Rome. They cannot stand loyalty to anyone that's above themselves, particularly not a foreign power like the Pope or the Vatican. So, and I would not trust them to keep their promises. I really think that the Vatican needs to be extremely careful in these negotiations and just really not trust anything that they say.
Because the trick there with the Chinese is that they want control of the bishops, right, who they want to name as Catholic bishops.
Right. So my understanding of the current deal that's on the table is the Chinese Communist Party will propose a panel of bishops, and the Vatican gets to pick one. Well, you know what? All of those bishops that they're going to be proposing are going to be loyal to the Communist Party over Rome. So it doesn't really matter which one is picked. It's not going to be, an authentic Catholic.
Okay, well, we'll continue to watch these negotiations and all things in China. Reggie Littlejohn, president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Vatican is denying a report in a German tabloid suggesting Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI is suffering from a neurological disease. The magazine quoted Benedict's brother saying the disease was forcing the former pope to use a wheelchair more and more. A spokesman says the report is false. Benedict will be 91 in April. Pope Francis is inviting 300 young people to the Vatican next month to personally present their hopes and concerns about the Catholic Church. Details of the March meeting were unveiled today in the Holy See press office. The cardinal who is organizing the meeting says it's a great opportunity for the church. The meeting is designed to help the Vatican prepare for a synod of bishops in October dedicated to young people. Coming up, at home in the White House, Dr. Alveda King discusses her relationship with the president and the vice president. And Year of the Dog. People in Asia and around the world celebrate a change in the calendar. Congressman Tim Scott of South Carolina marks the 200th anniversary of the birth of Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist and statesman. Syndicated columnist Star Parker, a frequent guest on News Nightly, was named to the Frederick Douglass Bicentennial Commission. The celebrations coincide with Black History Month. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsbee, in for Lauren Ashburn. Alveda King is another member of that commission and also the author of a new book. King Truths, 21 Keys to Unlocking Your Spiritual Potential, was published last month. In it, King describes how best to use our gifts from God while also sharing stories of growing up with her family. Our Lauren Ashburn spoke to her earlier this week.
Joining us now is Dr. Alveda King, niece of Martin Luther King Jr. and a pro-life advocate. Welcome back to the program.
It's wonderful to join you, Lauren, and all your viewers.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. Earlier this week, you met with Vice President Pence at the African American History Museum, along with other African American leaders. In the news, we often hear that African Americans are criticizing President Trump. What did you talk about?
This is such a wonderful Black History Month. I had already visited the museum with President Trump. Wonderful experience. So the visit with Vice President Pence seemed like an extension. And so we walked through and we saw the artifacts and the times from history. And we talked about, my colleague Day Gardner was with us, and she mentioned to him that it would be nice to have pro-life, examples there in the museum. The little babies were like little slaves. And so that point was made to him, but it was a wonderful visit.
He ran on several promises, that he wanted to rebuild Detroit, that he wanted to get rid of inner city violence, create jobs in the African American and Hispanic community, and reduce the number of people receiving welfare. But out of the things that he promised, I loved what he said at the top, saying every action that he takes, President Trump takes, he is going to ask himself, does this make life better for young Americans from Baltimore to Detroit to Ferguson, who have just as much right to live out their dreams as any other person? Do you think he is making good on his promises?
I believe that President Trump is making good on his promises. Vice President Pence is helping. The point that President Trump says, Americans are dreamers too. So we've got our millennials who have dreams. So the president, with the job market going up, with the unemployment going down, with the aborted babies and the mothers and fathers being considered now in the equation to make America great again, saying we can find other alternatives to abortion. All of these things that are occurring are making America great again, really.
The Congressional Black Caucus, black female lawmakers, some members did not show up at the State of the Union, and they criticize him not just for recent comments about race, but for racial discrimination at his businesses, the attack of Barack Obama not having a birth certificate. It goes on and on. Let's listen to what he had to say at the State of the Union.
African American unemployment stands at the lowest rate ever recorded.
Many of them you just saw did not stand up. Do you have dialogue with the Congressional Black Caucus, and why are they in such opposition to the president?
The very last time I had opportunity to talk with the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, I was asking them about abortion and to please do something about abortion. And as I've been in D.C. this week talking about these same issues, visiting the museum, having a press conference about the CBC, sitting on their hands during the State of the Union address. And so I'm saying, well, since you sat on your hands, you sat down on America, all of America, and definitely Black America, maybe it's time to sit down permanently and let those seats go for people who will stand up for our people and stand up for all Americans. And the way President Trump says it, he says, I don't care what color our skin is, our blood is red. We are Americans, one race, living in this nation. And we're going to have to do what my Uncle Martin Luther King said. We have to learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or perish together as fools.
And perish together as fools. Right before we go, I know that recently you were on Air Force One when the president signed a bill making Dr. King's birthplace a National Historic Park. It was a site, but now a park. Tell me what feelings that brought up for you.
I was so excited to be there with the president, my cousin Isaac Ferris Jr., and Bruce Lavelle, an appointee of the president as well. And I talk about my experiences in the King family in my new book, King Truths, and to think about and recall all of those principles that are in that book now being available to America and the world in a park that is in honor of my uncle. It was just spectacular. And it was fun going on to the big plane with the big boss and riding in the Beast to Air Force One and driving in that limo. Yeah.
Well, that is something that you won't forget very soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Alveda King, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks, Lauren, for that interview. There's a legal challenge to Ohio's new pro-life law. The law prohibits doctors from performing an abortion based on a diagnosis of Down syndrome. But the ACLU says that, quote, prevents women from exercising their constitutionally protected right to an abortion. The law, signed by Republican Governor John Kasich, takes effect March 23rd. Up next, Vatican diplomacy. The Holy Father welcomes a new ambassador. And talking shop, we visit with artisans who add color to the Vatican. The new ambassador of Korea to the Holy See presents his credentials to Pope Francis. Mr. Bak-man Lee has worked in government, television, and at a university. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsbee, in for Lauren Ashburn. A journalist from North Korea is describing her journey to the Catholic Church. Mi Jin Kang discovered the faith after escaping her country in 2009. At her baptism, she took the name Teresa. Our news partners have a lot more on her story. If you want to learn about that, plus the message the Pope has for a group of seminarians, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. Olympians in Pyeongchang celebrate the Lunar New Year. South Korea's team held a ceremony for the Year of the Dog. Athletes and officials took part in a traditional memorial service paying respects to their ancestors. After the ceremony, the team had a meal of Korean rice cake soup typically enjoyed at the beginning of the new year. The United States picked up 0 medals in the Olympics today. We're in 5th place in the medal count with 8 total. Norway leads with 19, followed by Germany, the Netherlands, and then Canada. Finally tonight, some of the most stunning stained glass windows in the Vatican come from a tiny glass-making workshop in the heart of Rome. Our Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley takes us to the shop.
Hidden in one of Rome's quaintest neighborhoods is a treasure trove of stained glass masterpieces. The Sistine Chapel, the Pope's private chapel, and the Pauline Chapel all have stained glass that hails from the Vetrate d'Arte Giuliani lab. Owner Elsa Giuliani tells me for decades, even the pontifical coats of arms have been made here. Elsa shows me the spectrum of colors, precisely 1,100. Her father-in-law started the glass business at the beginning of the last century. The shop only has a handful of employees and is very family-oriented. Chief technical designer Franco Gallese started working here in 1978 with help from his father, who was restoring the Sistine Chapel's windows.
Stavo facendo I concorsi, papà stava facendo il restauro della Cappella Sistina.
His father asked for help, and 40 years later, Franco hasn't looked back. Alessia Catallo is the house artist. She studied fine arts and is the one who paints on the glass. Alessia's depiction of Joseph and Mary's marriage will eventually appear as a stained glass window in a church north of Rome.
So Alessia has finished the face of the Virgin Mary. It would then go up here, and with the grisaille, she will do the chiaroscuro shadowing of each piece of the assembled painting, after which each piece is taken over here towards the other side of the workshop where the oven is, put inside the oven for 10 minutes at 650 degrees Celsius. That's 1,202 Fahrenheit.
While the workshop is famous for its papal connections, the group has crossed oceans and religions. They're the creative minds behind the windows in Rome's main mosque and the synagogue on Tiber Island. In Rome, Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Juliet. Many of us have seen those images of the stained glass windows, so it's interesting to find out where they come from. And that wraps up our newscast for tonight and for this week. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsbee. Thanks for watching. We're back here on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.